Dead Air Studios presents The Pain Chaser 1, Ambuscade, by Patrick E. Malloy, read for you by the author. This recording is released under a Creative Commons 4.0 license, so feel free to share it with your friends or enemies, but always give appropriate credit. This story is not intended for children and contains profanity, violence, and disturbing content that some people may find offensive. If you're in doubt, please turn back now, as you may find that some doors, once opened, refuse to be shut. "13. Tabby threw her weight against the door.
Anton! Anton, can you hear me?
She yelled.
Shit, Annie, the door's locked from the outside.
Annie's head spun. She suddenly felt odd. Her gums itched. Her belly ached.
What's happening?
She asked.
Hold on,
Tabby said through gritted teeth.
I was through this before. This is gonna feel a little odd.
The wave of unreality rolled over them. When the vertigo subsided, the two women were left looking at each other in wonderment.
It changed something.
Tabby answered Annie's unsaid question. There was a sudden rush of noise. It came at them like a radio having its volume turned up. It was whispering voices. Hundreds of them. 50, Annie told herself suddenly. 50 whispering voices. And they were panicked. Then, one voice, clear and loud, rose above them all. It was a voice that Tabby had heard before, in the hallway, before the appearance of the spectral blood. "Justine!" it bellowed. "It was all for you!" Suddenly, a strange apparition appeared. It seemed to burst into being from nothingness. It had the shape of a man, only it seemed to be made entirely of fire. It screamed in agony and ran in a wide arc, singeing the carpet with fiery footprints. As it passed, things burst into flame. It collided with a bookshelf and toppled it over. Fire poured out over the overturned books, seeming to leak away from the strange flaming phantasm, like a spilled container of some fiery liquid. The ghost itself had vanished, but now fire licked hungrily all around the room, and it was spreading quickly.
Annie, we need to get out of here!
Tabby screamed, but the look in Annie's eyes startled her. Annie was no longer there. Her eyes had a terrifyingly haunted vacancy. In Annie's mind, she was reliving her childhood. Images passed through her mind's eye, her brother's smoldering corpse, her parents huddled together across a gauntlet of flame, unable to reach her. She reached out across the flaming library at a figure that was not there.
Mom!
She cried.
Mommy! Annie!
Tabby said, coughing, as smoke began to fill the room.
Annie, snap out of it! I need you here!
Tabby pulled Annie down away from the creeping black smoke. It billowed above them, promising a long and painful death. She looked up at the double doors. Each door had a thin vertical window, reinforced with crisscrossing wires. If she could break it, she might be able to unlock the door. She pried the axe from Annie's fingers and stood. She swung hard, but the glass held sturdy. Choking as smoke stung her eyes, she threw herself back to the floor and to Annie's side.
Mommy!
Annie was crying.
I can't reach you! Annie,
Tabby choked.
come on, snap out of it, girl! I don't have the balls to do this without you!
She took a deep breath and held it, rising to her feet. Another swing, and this time, the glass shattered. She exhaled sharply and thrust her arm through the opening. Glass and exposed wire cut into her skin, but she ignored it. She felt frantically on the other side of the door, grasping the panic bar, but she could not find the locking mechanism. Too much. She dove below the smoke again to take another breath. Annie had her good arm wrapped around her legs and was rocking back and forth.
Annie, please, wherever you are right now, I need you to listen to me. You were there for me when I needed you, and I'm here for you now. I just need you to be strong. I have my own daughter at home that needs me, and right now, I need you.
Annie looked at her with those haunted eyes.
Mommy?
She asked.
No, sweetie. Your mother's dead. She died when you were little.
She wondered if that was the right thing to say, as the words left her mouth. Would she make the shock worse?
Tabby.
Annie said in a whisper.
Yes.
Tabby said excitedly.
Yes, sweetie. It's me. Come back, please.
Annie said in a more confident tone.
What's... The fire!
Tabby said.
Well, I need to get out of this room. If the fire doesn't kill us, the smoke will.
The fire was everywhere now, devouring everything in sight. Their eyes and their sinuses burned with it, and the heat was becoming unbearable. A palpable thing that pressed in on them and tried to pervade their bodies. Then there was a voice on the other side of the door. Annie, he called. Tabby? Are you in there? It was David.
Yes!
They screamed together.
Get us out!
Give me a second. Somebody really did a job on this lock, he said. There was a click, and the door swung open. 2 women stumbled into the hall, blackened with soot and coughing, holding on to one another for support.
Where's Anton?
Annie asked. He's down there, waiting for you, David said, pointing down the hall.
What? Why?
Tabby began, but David cut her short. There's no time, he yelled. Go now! They didn't question. They just ran. Tabby almost carried Annie as they rushed down the hall. Behind them, David Archer began moving in the opposite direction and doubled back around the library. Annie let Tabby help support her weight as they walked. She was in bad shape, and she knew it. She was weakening by the minute now. She needed to get to a hospital, and soon. They saw Anton as they rounded the corner, and knew he must be dead. The man had been literally nailed to the wall. A stake had been driven through the bone of each of his wrists, crucifixion style. Worse, it appeared as if somebody had torn into his stomach with a hooked weapon. His entrails were exposed, blooming from his open wound like some kind of horrible flower.
Anton!
Annie screamed and tried to rush forward. She fell forward, unable to support her own weight, and sank to her knees.
No, Annie.
Tabby took her.
He's gone.
Anton!
She screamed again. Tabby rushed to her side and lifted her to her feet. Together, the 2 limped toward the gruesome scene. Anton's face was frozen in a grimace of agony. There was a stink that assaulted their senses. His bowels had let loose during his torture. As they approached his body, they were struck dumb in amazement. His chest moved gently up and down. He was breathing. He was still alive. Somehow, he was still holding on. Annie looked at Tabby, an unreadable emotion crossing her face.
Annie.
She said, shaking her head. Annie staggered forward and leaned close to him. She rested her hand against his shoulder, brushing his cheek gently. His eyes came open and slowly focused on her. Annie, he whispered.
I'm here.
It hurts to breathe. His voice was a croak.
I know, baby. I know.
Am I gonna die, Annie? He asked weakly. She nodded sadly, unable to lie to him. He returned her nod, almost seeming resigned to it. It was Archer, he said.
What?
She said in surprise.
No, David.
He's not what he claims to be. Don't trust him, Annie. Annie's mind reeled. Archer? How could he be involved? He'd helped them fight off the vessel. He'd saved her life personally. It didn't make any sense. She looked at Tabby, but Tabby returned her bewildered look.
Anton, how?
She began. It was Archer, he repeated. His eyes slipped closed again, as if the strain of just keeping them open was painful. His breath came in prolonged gasping spasms. He coughed, and blood oozed from the corner of his lips. Annie, please, he said. When his eyes came open, he was looking at her meaningfully, his eyes sharply in focus now. Without saying a word, they traveled down to the axe that she held. I don't want to burn, he said.
No.
Abby said, catching the look.
No, we can't. We have to.
Annie said. She was surprised to find that she was not even struggling with the idea. She knew only that she needed to end his pain. She gripped the axe tightly. Wait, he said, and his eyes slipped shut again. I need to tell you something first. He took another wheezing breath to steady himself, and when his eyes came open again, there were tears in them. The smell of smoke was getting stronger, and it was becoming uncomfortably hot in the hall. There was a girl, he said. Rachel. I think I loved her. I don't know. I didn't really even know her. He looked away, embarrassed.
Anton,
Annie said, touching his face gently.
it's okay.
No, he said. It's not. She was only 15. Annie was unable to hold back her look of shock, and it was evident that he'd caught it. No, it wasn't like that. I never did anything to her. He was crying outright now. We were friends. That's all. I never let it get out of hand. We talked online. Annie smiled at him gently.
Anton, it's okay to have a friend.
No, he said again. I lied about my age. I lied because I can't talk to women my own age. I wanted her, Annie. I fantasized about it. I fantasized about doing bad things with her.
But you didn't.
Annie said. No, he agreed. But I wanted to. That's bad enough. She threw an arm around his neck and kissed his cheek tenderly.
It's okay, Anton. We're all fucked up sometimes.
He nodded against her shoulder, wincing in pain and despair. I don't want to be fucked up this time, Annie, he said.
No,
She whispered in his ear.
no, this time you were the good guy, Anton.
He forced a smile, sighed. Annie, please. She nodded this time, drawing away from him, amazed at her daring. Tabby turned away, crying herself now. With her good arm, Annie lifted the axe into the air. Taking careful aim, Anton's eyes closed, and in the final seconds, hers did too. The two women limped away together, leaving Anton's corpse behind. The fire was spreading all throughout the first floor now, stealing into the walls like a pack of wraiths, taking back once again the prize it had claimed 40 years ago.
We need to get outside,
Annie said.
But the snow,
Tabby said.
we'll freeze to death. You're in no shape to walk. It's better than our chances in here.
Annie told her. As they turned toward the front entrance, they found David there waiting for them. He was just standing there, almost lazily, with his gun in his hand. That went better than I expected, he said.
What?
Annie was looking at him disdainfully. Anton, you did exactly what the old man said you would. Apparently, Shayna was right about you.
Shayna who? What the hell are you talking about, David? Who are you?
He flashed a bored smile and waved his gun at them, motioning them back the way they came. He did not actually point the gun, but his meaning was implied just the same. It doesn't really matter, he said. We don't have time now anyway. Tabby's face broke into an angry snarl.
Why are you doing this?
She growled.
Why the fuck did you kill Anton?
He shrugged. I have to. This is what we're here for. Besides, I didn't technically kill Anton. Annie did. And that makes all the difference. Annie and Tabby both stared at him, perplexed by what he was saying. But he just shook his head as if it wasn't worth the effort of explaining. It doesn't matter, he said, waving the gun again. Get moving.
Where do you want us to go?
Annie asked. The basement, he said, as if the answer should have been obvious to her. It's the only part of the building that the fire doesn't burn. He herded them toward the basement stairs and down into the boiler room, switched on a flashlight as they stepped into the darkness. Before the light came on, they could see that there was an illumination coming through the open door to the secret chamber. It was the flicker of firelight. Someone was down there, waiting for them. As they slid through into the little chamber, a man turned to look at them, his face breaking into a grin that you might give an old friend upon seeing them after a long hiatus. Finally! I can't wait to get started. How have you been, Annie? He asked. It was Chase Lawrence.
What the hell is going on here?
Annie asked, pulling herself from Tabby's side and standing on her own 2 feet as a subconscious act of defiance to the situation. An inception, Chase said, his smile becoming wide and warm. The unification of the seed of God with the perfect vessel. David stepped forward and placed the claustrum and the Book of Adumbril verses on the altar in front of Chase. Upon seeing the hated pyramid, Annie's throat went dry, and there was a sudden sharp pain in her stomach. "Thank you, brother," Chase told David, and David stepped to his side, gun in hand. "We don't really need the other one anymore, do we?" David asked, motioning with his gun at Tabby. Tabby's eyes went wide.
What?
She asked.
What do you mean you don't need me?
"Shut the fuck up," David told her. "There's so much anger in you," Chase said to David. "Don't give me that shit. That bitch almost broke my arm," David said, waving his gun wildly. Tabby flinched with each flick of his wrist. Chase shrugged. "Do what you will," he said simply. "We can't leave any witnesses." Without a word, David brought the gun up, pointed it at Tabby's face from less than 3 feet away, and pulled the trigger. There was a pop like a firecracker going off, and she fell like a marionette whose strings had suddenly been cut. Annie dropped to her knees, ignoring the pain from her various wounds.
Tabby! Tabby!
She cried. Tabby's eyes were open and staring. A neat red hole had been punched right above her left eye. She hardly looked wounded at all, but the back of her head told a far different story. Her long plait of blonde hair had turned shockingly dark. It looked black in the flickering candlelight. Annie was alone now. Of the 5 who came into this terrible place, only she remained. Fear gripped her, but it was like an old friend now. She rose mutinously to her feet and faced the 2 men. The look in Chase's eyes was mystifying, but unmistakable. It was a look of reverence.
I've got news for you,
She said, her voice taking on a hard edge.
Kill us if you want to. You've already missed the chance for your little inception. Your vessel is upstairs, tied up and probably already dead by now. Burned alive. Your buddy here helped us do it.
Chase laughed. He actually threw his head back and laughed. It was disturbingly sane and full of amusement. That thing? That creature's not the vessel. It's just a tool. A favorite pet of Ysotak. The pure vessel must be a thing devoid of guilt and remorse. That creature is tortured by everything it does. Guilt is its eternity. Guilt is the very thing that has twisted its form. It can't help its sadistic nature. Annie stared at him, uncomprehending. He beamed at her. You, Annie, he said. You are the vessel.
That can't be.
Oh, it can. And it is, he said, nodding. In fact, we crafted you as such. He motioned at David, and David came forward. He grabbed Annie around the shoulders and led her to the strange rack where she'd imagined she'd seen the dismembered corpse. She wondered now, after everything they'd seen, if it had been her imagination after all. She hardly fought as he attached the manacles. She knew the man could easily overpower her in her current state. The battle she would be waging now was one of will.
We read your book,
She said.
It said the vessel was forged in fire and kills without remorse.
And so you were. And you do, Chase said, turning to face her. Your whole life has been about fire. The fear of it and what it did to your life. Everything you are was forged in that experience.
But I don't kill,
She said, but the words caught in her throat. Don't you? Chase asked, cocking his head. She knew what he was about to say before he even said it. You killed Anton, not out of anger or some other misguided emotion, but out of mercy. It was an act of love. There is no remorse in that. Moreover, you've been purified by pain, both physical and mental. But most importantly of all, you are the vessel because you desire it to be so. Your body's changed its form to accept the spirit of Ysotak. You're to be his earthly mother. Haven't you felt the changes inside you? It It began the moment you stepped into this holy place. Chase came forward and knelt before her. He opened the buttons of her blouse, exposing her stomach. She saw now that it was swollen and distended. Her navel had begun to push forward. Suddenly, the things he said hit home. The things that could not be suddenly held weight. She thrashed against her bonds wildly. He placed his hand on her shoulder to calm her. "Peace," he said simply. "Your trial's at an end. You are to be as Mother Mary to our Messiah. You are Ei Sotak's chosen." She looked up at him with tears of rage and terror in her eyes.
"I don't want this,"
she said. His eyes still bore that maddening peace. It was the look of a man that was confident in his convictions. "Well," he said, "part of you doesn't. Part of you is still fighting it. But that part will die away with time. You were born to serve, as we all were. And in time, you will come to accept that."
"I will never accept it,"
she spat. "You will see," he said, and rose to his feet.
"That thing, that creature that killed my friends, it tried to kill me too. Why would it try to kill me if I was your vessel? Why did David help us?"
"The sadist, for that is what it's called," Chase said, "is a creature with very little restraint. He can be a little overzealous at times. He was never meant to kill you, only the others. And David was there to make sure nothing went wrong. It was all part of your purification. You were the only one that mattered," David added. "We went through quite a lot to get you here in the first place. I wasn't about to let you get killed by that lumbering idiot. It nearly killed me a couple of times trying to keep him in line. Bastard sure can take a bullet."
"So you chose me for this?"
she asked unbelievingly. "Oh, yes," Chase said. "The Morsus Liberi has been watching you for some time. We went to great lengths to find you and make sure you arrived here, where we could purify you without outside interference. We needed a woman who met our prerequisites, but was still strong-willed enough to be able to murder in compassion, and who desired a child more than anything in the world. It's taken us 20 years to find a suitable vessel. You should be very proud." David picked up the claustrum from the altar, as well as a small jar with something sticking out of it. He knelt before her, placing both jar and claustrum at her feet.
"What is that?"
she asked. "India ink," he said, stirring the little bottle with what she could see now was a brush. "We need to make a mandala for the inception."
"A what?"
she asked. "A mandala," he repeated. "I'll show you." Again, she was struck by just how odd Chase's manner was. He had her chained here to a torture rack, crusted with ancient blood, yet his demeanor was one of kindness and patience. He grasped a thin silver chain from inside his shirt and pulled it out, producing a silver key. At least she thought it was a key. She'd never seen anything quite like it. It resembled a turnkey from a wind-up toy, but it was beautiful, carved with tiny, intricate patterns. Chase inserted the key into the small hole at the bottom of the claustrum and turned it. Instantly, the 3 unbroken sides of the pyramid rolled back, revealing a small, flat stone with an ornate, round design painted on its surface. The feeling of unreality rolled over her as before, and she could feel a strange throbbing, as if a heart was beating just behind her eyes. "Don't be afraid," Chase said and lifted the stone free. "This is Ei Sotak's mandala. It's a crest that binds his essence to this stone. The substance is called karmat. It's utterly indestructible." He held it out so that she could look at it. She turned her head away. "Go ahead and look at it. If anyone has the right, it's you, Annie," he said. "Is this going to take long?" Dave asked, fidgeting. "Somewhere else you wish to be?" Chase asked him without even looking, and wiped the excess ink off of his brush. "No, I just don't like the idea of being trapped down here while the school burns to ashes above us." Chase ignored him and began to paint a large circle on Annie's stomach. The ink was cold, and it made her shiver involuntarily.
"Chase,"
she whispered.
"you still have time to stop this madness. You don't have to do this."
She knew even as she said it. Whatever Chase was, he wasn't crazy. He did stop momentarily and looked into her eyes. His smile was warm and disarming. That face, she thought, was the mask of an angel hiding the face of a devil. My real name's not Chase, Annie. It's Paul Shepard, he said and went back to work. Annie wrung her head in abject submission. She could no longer hold back the tears that leaked from her eyes. She thought about Henry and was at once filled with guilt. She would probably never see him again, and he wouldn't even know why. She wept silently. Paul Shepard's brush worked in long, practiced strokes. This symbol was one he knew well. It quickly became a larger replica of the one painted on the flat stone, but not once did he look at it for reference. As he painted the mandala, a strange warmth stole over Annie that was strangely appealing. It flooded through her, bringing with it feelings of correctness. It spoke of peace and rest. It spoke of an end to the violence. She rejected it and focused instead on her husband's face. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you like what you've heard so far, please consider supporting my Patreon. I try to do this for free, but I do have to support myself somehow. Also, physical copies of my books are available